let's talk about collectible merchandise and Pokemon. For the rest of us, not crazy collectors, not insane scalpers, those of us who are normal collectors, let's have a chat. Sports cards are obviously my main favorite, right? That's what I grew up passionate about when I was a kid. It's what I love now. But I also, as a kid, bought some Pokemon cards. So I have some of the original, the base set, shadowless. My sons love looking at the binder that I got them in. I've only graded a couple just to kind of get my feet wet and see what they would get, personal collection. But recently, I've been interested in collecting additional things. And I look at these things from one, just because I love them and they're pretty awesome. Long-term investing, it makes sense to diversify. I talked about that on the previous video. I think we would be wise to, if we're going to collect for the point of collecting long-term, that it be either highly liquid or worth something one day or pass it on, yada, yada, to diversify what it is that we are collecting. And ironically, it was about 6 months or so before Jeff Wilson, the sports card investor, put out an episode where he bought box after box after box. I forget the purpose of the collection of Sports Illustrated and sports magazines. And a lot of them were very high quality. I think some are graded. And I think he kind of, foresaw what I saw. People also love to add to their collections because it's the fear of missing out, right? You're late to the card hobby. Prices are crazy. Can't afford to pay for the stupid expensive ones that you want. So you kind of shift gears to something maybe you can't afford. Like, I've recently started collecting magazines within the last year. I used to keep the Beckett's all the time. I kept the ones from when I was a kid. I've gotten some additional ones like the ones behind me in collections that I purchased. And I just love them. I mean, it's almost like an artwork, which I make fun of for now that I'm saying it out loud. PokeRev, all the guys that put out the Pokemon content, which I'll get to in a second. They're always talking about the artwork, right? The artwork, it's great. But I feel the same way about the magazines. The covers of these magazines, especially when they're framed, are awesome to me. I'd rather have those in some nature photo or whatever hanging around my office. But at the same time, some of these magazines, it's no different than cards. The condition matters, whether or not it has somebody's address or it's like a newsstand copy. That makes a difference. But at the same time, they're awesome conversation pieces, right? Especially if the article's inside. That Mickey Mantle that I put... I didn't show you guys this. Check this out. So this is something that I found at a flea market. You can see it. In Tennessee. And a friend of mine that's kind of in my network of collectors that I speak to, he moved his shop to a different location, and the gentleman who he moved in with had this just laying around like in totes, the magazines and stuff he had. That I sent over to Mike from Chasing Cardboard, if you guys are not familiar with the show, and kind of commented that the authentication company that was on there I wasn't very familiar with, and had him take a look and say his thoughts. So I sent some zoomed in pictures, and his opinion is that it's a real autograph, so he thinks it's legitimate, which was great news to me because I have a Mickey Mantle autograph, right, for an affordable price, which was insane. And it's on a unique piece. It's an article about Mickey Mantle from the 80s. But the other cool thing about it is on the back, and it may be backwards on the camera, but it's about the F-Face card from Bill Ripken, which I just so happened to have gotten a PSA non-copy of, I think, last week or the week before. So, man, I was beyond excited. I mean, how often do you run across Mickey Mantle autographed unique things like this? So the networking makes a big difference. elephant in the room. I think we all know what the additional collectibles are that make sense. And fortunately for me, I'm investing in them because my kids love them. And that is Pokemon cards. There's a lot of facets there to unbox. There's the collecting of the wax itself, the ETBs, the boxes that are still wrapped up. People even grade them. They put them in these massive containers and say, this is worth a fortune, because after they stop printing them, there are no more. And it makes sense. It irritates me, but I understand why people do it. I put out some things on TikTok about this previously. From a long-term investment standpoint, you are going to make great money buying and holding on to these boxes long-term. Even if it's just a 15-20% return on your investment, you're going to make money, because eventually they're going to stop printing these things. However, my kids collect them, and at times I cannot find them. And that drives me crazy, because I know that there are grown men out there, grown women, who are buying these things and stashing them away. That really doesn't bother me as much as a 55-year-old guy who's scalping and running a table somewhere, and he's charging triple the price to kids to come in and buy a pack. That really irritates the crap out of me. It drives me insane. Because when my kids want a pack and I can't find them, I'm not going to pay $15 a pack. I'm just not, out of principle. I'd be more likely to steal it from you and then rip it in half and throw it in the trash can. It's frustrating. That being said, Pokemon is going to be around for a very long time. It is going to be right alongside sports cards. It's going to be right alongside Magic the Gathering, which is another animal all by itself. There are additional things to collect that make sense. And I think Pokemon is one of those things. So as bad as the traditional collectors that used to go to card shows and all the shops, I think they've kind of been intimidated in the last couple of years about how many people have actually picked up on the trend of Pokemon and the firestorm that comes with that, right? There's a ton of content creators out there. There's even some that I watch just to kind of get up to speed with what's happening in the hobby. I like the Poke NE guy. He's sarcastic and just, that's just my kind of personality, so I like it. I like PokeRev just because he seems like a nice guy. I mean, he really cares about what he's saying. He cares about what people says in his comments. You can tell it affects him. So I find that genuine, even though he's a huge channel, so I'm sure there's a ton of people that hate his guts for whatever reason. There's a lot of information that they put out, among others, that kind of let you know where it's going to head. And that's why I like watching the channels. The trading card market is not going to go anywhere. The Star Wars and any additional products they can come out with that get people, they're first in. They want to be a part of that first in because they've seen what happens. They bypassed on Pokemon years ago, and now look how much these things are. It's crazy. My suggestion is this. If you're going to be a collector and you like those things, by all means, either get them or don't get them. You're just a collector, right? If you're looking at it from an investment standpoint, there are some of these cards, some of these sets that it makes sense to purchase for long-term investing. I really think that, PSA just started grading the magazines, going back to that. So that trend is going to continue to rise. And it's kind of an early adopting type situation, because even though they've been popular for a long time and collectors have collected them for years, I don't think it's really ever been looked at as an investment opportunity for, or in the same line as sports card investing. And I think as we move forward, we're going to find new categories that kind of fall into the same thing, even outside of sports and trading cards. Comic books has always been huge. It kind of rivals sports cards as far as a kid doesn't like sports cards, they collect comic books. Until trading card games like Magic and Pokemon came around. But coins, different kind of paper money. ways to diversify. I talked about this in one of my previous videos. So if you haven't watched that one, I think it's episode 2 that I put out. Go back and check that one out. There's a lot of different ways and reasons to collect in the hobby. But the one to focus on today, I really want to dive into, is trading cards. I think we're at a time. I'm not trying to make a prediction or be the first to say anything, because I won't be, I promise. I think we're at a time where market share for trading cards is maybe not equal to, but at least rivals that of sports cards. There are just as many people involved in that side of the hobby as there is the sports cards. And it really drives traditional collectors crazy, because they go in a card shop, they go in a show, and more than half of the tables are set up for Pokemon cards, or, was it Yu-Gi-Oh!, all these different things, where a vendor used to have sports cards. And I think there's a lot of resentment that's kind of entered into the same world, because a lot of collectors now, just like myself, I'm buying both, right? One's for my kids. I also would buy them for an investment. I have the old ones that I had, but I'm also into memorabilia, which has always been huge, but certain memorabilia, right? Jerseys have been big, autographed balls, bats, helmets. But now we have other things to buy that potentially could be graded and worth additional value. So as you move on, even if you've been a traditional collector, and I don't want to try to hype this up anymore to where I can't find the cards. Not that I have that kind of influence, but you never know. I suggest diversifying your collection, or at least your investment collection. What you kind of consider PC, but more of an investment than something you love. I suggest putting Pokemon into that. And if you're going to stockpile something in your closet because you're a collector, the sealed product, if you can find it, well, let me preface this. If there's kids behind you waiting in line, and they want to buy the newest set of Pokemon cards to take out and trade, have fun, play the games, show their friends, do not be that guy or that lady who tries to unload, try to get every single box in that store, and dads can't come in and buy it for their kids, because I've been that dad. That being said, if there are sets, if Pokemon would do a sufficient job in printing, and they would actually provide enough product to supply and demand, it's common sense. For some reason, they can't seem to figure it out. I don't know if they're trying to fabricate scarcity to drive hype to the products, but it wouldn't make sense to them, because people are, the demand is so high, they would make a fortune if they actually printed to demand. And they keep making announcements saying that they're going to, all this kind of crap. It just doesn't make sense. That being said, if it is being printed to demand, if they ever get it fixed, and let's say you show up to GameStop one day to buy a pack of cards, and oh look, people are actually leaving the store without emptying all the shelves first, maybe get a couple of those and put them back into the closet, sealed for a later investment. I know that's a lot to ask, because you kind of have to take advantage. I've ran into situations where I want to buy them for my kids, and I'll walk in and I'll be lucky enough to where, for whatever reason, the supplier showed up late that day. Like, I run to Dollar General down the street to pick up milk or something, and they just happened to have brought a brand new pack or case of Prismatic Evolutions, little tins or something. And this actually happened. So my wife calls me. She tells me, hey, they've got these down here. And I walk in, and she didn't know what it was. So I walk in, I see it, and I'm like, oh, man. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to get a couple of them. And the guy at the register, he's like, do you want all of them? And apparently there's no limits at Dollar General. So I thought about it, and I was like, as soon as I do this, what's going to end up happening is some kid is going to walk in behind me and ask his mom, hey, Mom, can I get some cards? And she's going to say no, because there are none. And even if she says yes, well, I said that wrong, but you get my point. The cards are not going to be there because some guy just came in and cleaned them out. If I left some behind for them to buy, that would make me feel great, because that's what it's made for, right? But at the same time, I know that some a-hole is about to come in behind me and he's going to buy the entire box, not for his kids, but so he can flip it on Facebook Marketplace for an additional $10 a tin. That is beyond frustrating. Like, beyond frustrating. Because, I can't predict whether or not he's going to buy them. And I'd say there's a lot of people in the same situation. You see the investment opportunity. You see what could potentially be long-term because you see the prices now on previous printed product. And you think, well, if I don't get it now, some guy's just going to come in behind me. It's never making it to the kids anyways. And that logic makes perfect sense because, screw the guy that's scalping it. Let's go ahead and just get it for my family and my kids can open them up. But then you realize there's no chance at that point that a kid may ever walk in and pick it up because you just bought all of it. Even if it's for your kids, you can try to find some more. Or your kids can go without 1 week, right? It's just tough. There's not a good way to do it when demand does not meet, supply does not meet demand. It causes problems, especially when a hobby is so popular. All that aside, if there's an opportunity, let me just try to encourage it in the way that I see it being morally right, which people are going to disagree with me. If supply ever meets demand to a point where you have enough cards on shelves to where a kid can purchase exactly what he wants or what his parents allows, you leave some behind, you don't clear the shelf out. There's a few extras that you see that you can pick up. I think it's a wise investment because long term, the Pokemon characters can't get DUIs, right? They can't get rape allegations and crazy stories that happen about them because they're cartoon characters, right? But and being equally as popular as maybe not equally, but as popular as sports cards, it's a safer investment, which is crazy. A Hall of Fame career player versus Pikachu. And Pikachu's going to hold more value long term. That's crazy. It makes no sense that there's no track record. It's just a cartoon character. But that's where we are. Unfortunately, that's exactly what's happening. So I would, a previous video, if you haven't watched that one, please go back, the episode before this one. I'm talking about grading, buying graded cards, buying PSA 8s, PSA 9s, because in the future, I think the long-term investment opportunity on those is going to be crazy. I highly suggest that in the Pokemon market as well. I think demand for those, people can't always afford the tins. They're not as liquid, right? Sometimes you're going to sit on those for a long time. But a PSA 9, a PSA 8, and even in some cases a 7, you can actually liquidate that faster if you're trying to, and you're not just trying to collect it, way faster than a 10 most of the time. Because average Joes like myself who live in a house and pay bills and don't have to worry about, how do I spend this much money because it's not there. 8s and 9s are very attractive, and over time the upside is huge. Pokemon, I think, is no exception. Actually, I think it will outperform in an 8 and a 9 eventually for long-term investing, more so than a sports card in a 9 or an 8. I could be wrong there, but that's my hunch, and I'm curious what you guys think. If anybody has an opinion on that, I'd appreciate a comment because I'm learning that world. My bar is growing, a progress bar of what I know there, and I do know quite a bit at this point. But looking at the long-term investing standpoint from Pokemon is a lot different than sports cards. It seems the same, but certain sets get hyped up just like certain players. And then all of a sudden the price just tanks. Right? So you want to make sure you get in at a good price. And I still suggest you using apps like Market Movers or Sports Card Investor to look and see what the charts show historically of the price of those cards. I think Pokemon is a wise investment. I think some of the stuff coming out that is additional collectibles, like the increase in magazines and sports books and additional memorabilia that's not always been the classic go-to, is going to be a wise investment for the long term. There'll be a few things that people really don't care about. It's just, vintage things that go back to Hall of Famers. You find a Sports Illustrated with Joe DiMaggio on it. Found one of those yesterday. Sandy Koufax. Whatever it is, 1960 Sports Illustrated. It may only go at $5, but it's awesome. And you can put it in a frame, put it on your wall behind you in your office or wherever, and it makes a great decoration. Magic the Gathering, people mostly play that. It's not as collectible as Pokemon as far as long-term investing. But you guys could take me to school on that one. I actually would appreciate that. That's something I've not had a lot of time to spend researching the differences between. I know it's definitely not as popular as collecting as Pokemon. But I don't know. What are the other things? Those are the things that I want to encourage you to invest, because I strongly feel like that's going to be the way we go. Pokemon is king right now. And I have a feeling that at the very least it may go down just a little, but it's not going to go very far. Magazines, articles, things that are unique and awesome, things that you can grade, which now you can. Those are going to be sought after. I highly suggest you get some of those for the long term, not the short term. I appreciate so far you guys coming in and checking out the videos. I have some more topics to bring up, but as I go through these things, what I'm trying to do is facilitate discussion, because as much as I've learned, I also have that much and more to learn. I'm not going to claim to be an expert in everything in the hobby, but as you gather enough information and you start to see firsthand how these things work, and you start to process kind of, when to hit the brakes, when to hit the gas, what's going to be trending long term. A lot of that is based on previous experience I have in marketing. It's one of those fancy, expensive pieces of paper on my wall. Says that I should know about those things, and I try to put it into practice every now and then. So I'd like to know your opinions, because there's a lot of you out there who've been doing this a lot longer than me. And there's a lot of you out there who also think that you know more than everybody else, and I welcome your opinions too. I'm not going to discriminate on that. So if you wouldn't mind, I always forget to do this on the videos, especially on TikTok. If you guys wouldn't mind to subscribe, like whatever it is that you do on YouTube, I would definitely appreciate it, because I'm trying to regrow a channel. And if you wouldn't mind checking out the other videos, I'm going to try to keep out some consecutive episodes coming. So hope you guys are having a good day, and we'll catch you on the next one. See you.